Hi guys! So this is Brenton. Before this episode starts, I just wanted to cut in and say we got a little bit, when we did the top 10 music episode, we ran about 50 minutes and we assumed that this top 10 TV episode was going to run about the same. And it ended up being double that because we wanted to give a lot of context and a lot of texture to each of our selections that maybe we didn't necessarily with the music thing. So we went a little bit long and we made the decision to cut this in half. So the episode that you're about to listen to is going to be part 1, which is going to be honorable mentions through our number 6 selections. Part 2 will be next Tuesday, and that'll be our 5 through 1. So when this cuts, you'll get the rigmarole and all that, and then and then part 2 will be next Tuesday. Enjoy. Second episode of the BeXtraG podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet at the nexus of the universe and are melded as seamlessly as HBO and unnecessary sex and violence. I am one of your hosts, Brenton Beswick, alongside my co-host, Scott Disick's little brother, Greg Filson. Greg, how are you tonight?
Yeah, few people know that. You're one of them. Yeah, it's good to see my slightly older brother just out there with 19-year-old girls, so here we go.
That is pretty good. Good for him.
Yeah.
So, tonight we're going to do our top 10 TV shows of all time. We set the rule for our list. This isn't necessarily true of all the lists that were submitted to us, but we set the rule of no game shows, no reality shows, and no miniseries. So this precludes Greg from picking Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but it also precludes me from picking Lonesome Dove. But I'm going to tell you, a man who don't cheat cutting cards for a poke, don't want to poke that bad. So we did our top 10 in descending order. 2 honorable mentions.
I can cut it to 2.
Okay.
I had 3, but it's an honorable mention that's kind of like not an honorable, like the show's very early on, and it's just more of me saying it probably will be in my top 10.
Yeah,
but
we can do 3 because I can shoehorn a third one in there. That's fine.
Okay.
We got plenty of good listener submissions, and we'll kind of add those in as we go. What is that? What is that noise?
Oh, the fire crackling in the
Oh,
background.
I don't like that.
I'm sorry.
That's gonna come in. Well, if you hear that, just
a
understand
fire
that there's a young man in Santa Barbara where it's 90 degrees and there's a fire crackling beside him.
It's not 90. It's in the 50s. It's in the 50s.
Ooh.
And the house is cold. The house is cold. You gotta warm up the house But yeah, it should be soothing to hear the fire crackling in the background.
It's distracting me.
Fireside chats.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you hear some crackling, that's what it is. Okay. Let's do our honorable mentions, and then we'll do a few listener submissions, and then we'll go into our top 10s. How's that sound?
Sounds good. You want me to roll first?
Well, let me back up. We didn't do any of our intro stuff, like at all. We have the...
It's a BeXtraG.
Yeah, that's true. The regular BeXtraG podcast posts every Friday. We do one, potentially more, but so far one extra episode such as this a month. We're gonna try to keep it to 1, maybe 2. We did decide that if we do more interviews, we're gonna try to do them as their own thing, because the one with our author friend JCL Falto was a little girthy, and the feedback on that was that the episode was good, but it was also really long whenever we tacked on our regular content to the end of the interview. So if we do more interviews, we're going to break them up into an extra thing. So follow us on I'm all out of sorts because I don't have any of this written down. So usually I'm reading straight off the script. Follow us on our social media accounts: Twitter at BXG Podcast, Instagram at BXG Podcast, Facebook.com/BXG Podcast. The website where you can go and stream the episodes directly is BXG podcast.podbean.com. There's youtube.com /BXG podcast, where we have the episodes posted, and then we're also working on getting some video content like the pizza reviews and the game streams and stuff like that up. So things are kind of coming together. We do appreciate the feedback and the listeners and everything like that. But I would say when you see us post stuff, don't just click like. Comment, because all your comments make it into the shows. Keep that in mind. We want crowd participation or listener participation. We got some good lists here for the TV episodes. So we'll start with our honorable mentions, as we said, and then we'll do a few listener things, and then we'll get into our top 10. So why don't you go ahead?
All right, I've the three. There was really one that was tough to leave out. And that's Bob's Burgers, because I absolutely love Bob's Burgers. I had it in there, and then I thought of a show that I grew up with, and it bumped it. If you watch Bob's Burgers, it's one of those shows where you can watch it in order, and it kind of makes sense, but you can just pick a random episode, and it's just funny. There's nothing offensive about it. It's kind of one of those perfect things. It's like a modern family show that's a guy making burgers, and I really, really like that. And not to use the actual Modern Family, but it's one of my favorites.
It's animated, correct?
Yeah, and it's hilarious, and it's just a really fun show. I think it's a great show that you can get into anytime. I've watched recent episodes of it too, just randomly, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is great. 30 Rock was a tough omission, but not as super tough for me, just because I think it's the issue that I had with this show, and this is not a negative thing, is I watched it in real time and haven't gone back and rewatched it.
Yeah.
So, in the moment, I'm like, this show is incredible, but I probably need to go back and rewatch it. It's one of Janie's favorite shows. I think it actually might be her favorite.
That's a good one.
I haven't looked at her list. She just handed it to me, and it wouldn't shock me if it's number one for her.
Okay.
And then Succession is my one thing where it's like, it just hasn't been on long enough.
Right.
I have a feeling if it goes 5 or 6 seasons, it's probably going to crack my top 10 pretty easily, because I absolutely love that show, and since I'm friends with Jeremy Strong and everything out here, yeah. So there you go. That's my that's those three right there.
The one that I'm going to add in is I had two, and then since you want to do three, I had one that I was really on the fence about, and that's Arrested Development. And the reason why I was on the fence for it is the original 3 seasons that aired in the early 2000s are some of the best comedy out there. It was really ahead of its time in terms of some of the jokes and some of that. It had a crazy ensemble cast when you look at the cast, and then even some of the cameos that people made. The reason why I left it off my main list and didn't even include it in my honorable mentions is the Netflix seasons are terrible. They're not. Yeah. They're not good. The first one that they did, they were only able to get all of the characters in the room for like 2 days. So they filmed everything individually, and they tried to splice it together, and it was very strange, very weird. Like I said, crazy talented ensemble cast. Jason Bateman, the lead. His son's played by Michael Cera. Will Arnett, Jeffrey Tambor, David Cross. Cameos from Henry Winkler, Carl Weathers, just all kinds of guys. Thomas Jane, Ben Stiller's wife. Very, very funny show. But like I said, the Netflix seasons after the original run, which got canceled after 2.5 seasons, the Netflix seasons are objectively bad. So that's why it didn't make it into my top 10. Second honorable mention is Sons of Anarchy, and it's kind of a similar thing with Arrested Development. The first several seasons were so strong, and then it just kind of got... Like, the season they go to Ireland wasn't very good, and then after that, it just kind of seemed like it was just excessively violent, and how could they trump the previous episode by making the next episode more violent? And it kind of tailed off for me. I didn't really care for the end, so it's an honorable mention one. My last honorable mention one goes to one of the classic Nickelodeon shows from the late 80s, early 90s, and that's Salute Your Shorts. Are you familiar with Salute Your Shorts?
Vaguely familiar. I've heard of it. I've never watched it.
So Salute Your Shorts, I think it was only 2 or 3 seasons, but it was a show on Nickelodeon about these kids that were at a summer camp. And like the camp counselor was this horrible guy named Ugg. And there was like a bully and then like a big fat kid. But it was very funny, and it was one of those shows that was like, as soon as we got cable when I was a kid, that and Hey Dude, which was very similar, but it was about a dude ranch instead of a summer camp. But I have to give a shout out to Salute Your Shorts as an honorable mention.
Okay.
So let's do like the first 3. I'll do Barry J. He says True Detective Season 1, Dexter, New Girl, The Office, Game of Thrones, Sons of Anarchy, Breaking Bad, Scrubs, and It's Always Sunny. Now I will say that unlike the music episode where we got a very wide array of selections, I think there's probably going to be several repeats on a lot of these. The one thing that I would point out in this list in particular is True Detective Season 1, and I kind of count that as a mini-series, or else it wouldn't have, or else that particular season would have made my list. The second season was a no for me, dog, and I haven't gotten a chance to see the third one yet. But the first one is one of the best pieces of television that I've seen in a really long time, so I'm totally down with True Detective Season 1.
Me too. All right.
Yeah. Time is a flat circle. And all the crazy things that Matthew McConaughey says throughout.
It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, like, Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson were just perfect for those 2 roles, respectively. I don't think that that was just perfect casting of those 2, for sure. You want to do the second one?
Yep. Jonathan P. Battlestar Galactica, The Shield, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Peaky Blinders, and Sons of Anarchy. My comment is I just started Peaky Blinders, first episode. I'm pretty hooked. We just got into Queen's Gambit, so yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that I was gonna say from this list. I've seen Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Sons of Anarchy. The one that's on here that I would really like to watch is Peaky Blinders.
I think you would like, just based purely on the first episode. I'm hooked. I like Cillian Murphy anyhow, so
yeah, right. Phil. Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Always Sunny, The Office, Vikings, Game of Thrones, Seinfeld, Curb, Your Enthusiasm, and Modern Family.
This is just a solid list to me. Having known Phil, I've known how long have I known Phil for 30 years? I probably could have done this list for him.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The only one that I really haven't, I haven't seen Curb Your Enthusiasm, and everybody tells me because I have an affinity for Seinfeld that I would love it.
Sure.
And I eventually would like to watch it, but I wouldn't mind watching Vikings. I've heard good things about that. I've heard that it's medieval.
Yeah, that's it. Phil talked to me about one time, just telling me how much he loved it. He's like, he said something similar to that, and I was like, well, I haven't watched Sons of Anarchy either, so I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sons of Anarchy was kind of like lightning in a bottle. I feel like it came along at the right time, and Charlie Hunnam, the lead, is he's a handsome man, and then Ron Perlman and Katie Seagal.
Not a handsome man.
Not a handsome man, not at all. He looks his jaw is something else, man.
His jaw has a jaw, yeah.
Yeah, it's cast iron if ever there was a cast iron jaw, but he's a pretty solid actor. He's done some good stuff. He's the original Hellboy.
He is the original Hellboy. Never forget.
Now, what's his name from Stranger Things? Why can't I think of his name? Fat guy.
David Harbour.
Yeah, David Harbour. He's the new Hellboy. I don't think it did very well. All right, you want to get into our list?
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
All right. Why don't we're going to abandon the snake draft format. We're just gonna go every other. Do you want to go first, or do you want to go second?
I'll go first.
Okay, go ahead.
This was a show that
Let me just before you go, let me just say, when we did the music one, Greg got some heat for his.
There was a lot of heat in the streets for me, which I wasn't shocked.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place.
I think I'm going to be the one that gets the heat this time.
I think the mid portion of mine will get some heat, but I think I'm pretty solid with my top 4, and I think my first 2 or my 9 and 10, even 8. But I think 5, 6, and 7. People who know me will understand 5, 6, and 7. Right. People who don't are going to be like, "What is going on?" But 10 for me is a show that, thanks to my mother and letting me stay up late, I got into at a very early age when it started, and that's ER. And I absolutely love that show. Even as a child, I was like, this show's really good. And it was created by Michael Crichton. I don't know a lot of people know that. But it's George Clooney before he was George Clooney. I mean, it's one of those things where it's him, and the cast was incredible. And not that I even cared when I was a little kid. I just thought this was good, captivating television. And I was like looking stuff up just to kind of fact check myself, and it's listed as a romance. which it is, but it's the whole reason why all these medical shows, like, it's the reason why Grey's Anatomy is a thing.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and Grey's Anatomy, I believe, is in its 95th season this year.
Yeah. I think 96.
96.
It did just win People's Choice Award.
It's insane to me.
Show of the Millennium.
It's insane to me. I've only watched a little bit of it. I think I was too much of an ER fan. I stopped watching ER after Anthony Edwards' character died. Mark Green, Dr. Green. Anthony Edwards was in Top Gun. Anyhow,
was he Goose?
He was Goose.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I stopped watching after he died because it was just spoiler for anyone out there. And it was season 8, and I have a rule about TV shows that we'll get into with my number one. But it's just one of my favorite. It obviously is one of my favorite shows, but for me, it's also the reason why we have all these shows that aren't necessarily good. Now, Grey's Anatomy, I'm not going to comment on, but all the other like shows that are just kind of on, and Chicago PD and Fredonia, Pennsylvania, ER, like all these things that are even on that. No, it's the whole reason. ER is the reason, and a lot of people's careers were really boosted by this show, which I think is really cool too.
Yeah. Okay. When you said Anthony Edwards, I thought you were talking about Anthony Anderson.
Oh, yeah. No, he might.
Whose real name is Teddy from Hang Time. That's on his birth certificate.
Yes. Almost on the cusp of my top shows.
Hang Time.
Hang Time.
Yeah, that's a good one.
If we only did childhood shows, that'd be a fun one.
Yeah. Well, some of those made it in. I mean, I already called out Salute Your Shorts, but okay. Number 10. This one goes back, and this one is kind of a tribute to my dad. I didn't see this during its actual run because I was not alive. But my dad and I used to watch Gunsmoke. All the time.
Great.
on TV Land with Matt Dillon and Festus Hagen and all those guys. Matt, the Waterhole's point, like the whole, it was basically Woody's Roundup, just with real people. But my dad and I used to watch Gunsmoke, and that show was on for like 20 years, and I've seen probably the bulk of the episodes, just because they would show Gunsmoke on TV Land at like, 8 and 9, and we'd always catch the one after the second Jeopardy show where he knew all the answers because he had watched the first airing of it. But we, that was one of those things that I shared with him, and from the time that I was little through going to college, and we used to watch. I remember the first episode I watched, Festus Hagen had a boil on his rear end that had to get lanced. I don't know why that's a thing that I remember.
Of course.
So for me, number 10, prior to a lot of the shows of today and things like that, one of the longest running TV shows of all time, Gunsmoke.
It's a great pick. I mean, I've seen it. It brings me back to watching it with my grandpa. It's just, there's a reason why it was on for so many years. Because, shows were just, back then, shows were actually on that many years.
Yeah,
and,
MASH
right. There's a reason why. All right. So now we're on number 9. This was an easy one, but the reason why it's low is just I like it. It's just when my number 1 show is what my number 1 show is, and I have that expectation. Curb Your Enthusiasm is number 9.
Yep.
And I love Curb Your Enthusiasm, and the reason why it's lower and not higher is it's not appointment television for me. And I will say that rest of this, except for two other shows, are really appointment television for me. I love it, and I love going back on it, and Janie hasn't seen the early seasons. I've seen all the seasons except for one in its entirety. I think that was like season 7. It is what you expect when you look at the character of George on Seinfeld, and if you're just following him around, if he had just moved to LA, which, because everybody knows that Larry David is George. I mean, if you care
George
about
is
the
based
show.
on.
Yeah.
Right.
It's insane. It goes off the rails quite a bit. Most of it is improv. There's a storyline and stuff like that. If for anyone new to Curb, it's still very Seinfeld-esque, but there's just, for me, and it's still great. Obviously, I have this in my top 10. It just isn't Seinfeld in what I want from a show. While it's awesome and I love it, and I think it's hilarious. I think it's one of those shows too that it didn't change anything. The way, and somehow it still is great. And most shows have changed TV in some way that I
Right.
have in my list. This show didn't change anything.
Like Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, this show hasn't done anything to make anybody do a show differently, but yet it still holds tight. It's still in season 10, or it has 10 seasons, which is more than Seinfeld. And it just, I don't know, it's fun. It's fun to have someone that's more neurotic than me on a TV show. So I like watching that. I think it's another show where you can watch any episode. You don't have to watch it in order.
Right.
It's cool to watch it in order, but you can just pick up a random episode and you're going to have a laugh. It's a show I'll guarantee, as long as you're not easily offended.
Right, sure.
That's a big key to the show.
It's HBO, right?
It's HBO, and there's definitely stuff. It's really hard to offend me.
Right.
And I think that might be part of the reason why it's low too. It's just that it's not going to be for everyone, and you do have to be kind of in a mood to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. So yeah, that's my 9.
Yeah, I think that Anthony Jeselnik is funny, so nothing offends me.
Right.
Number 9 for me is going to be just to back up. I don't have a whole lot to say about Curb other than I know that I'd like it, and I've been told by many, many people that I would like it, and I just haven't gotten around to watching it yet. So it's tough for me to really render any kind of verdict on that show, other than Larry David is hilarious, and his impression of Bernie Sanders on Saturday Night Live is so spot on that it's kind of creepy. Number 9 for me is another old Nickelodeon classic. This time it's an animated, and it's Rocko's Modern Life. Rocko's Modern Life follows a wallaby named Rocco and his friends. He's friends with a cow named Heifer. He's friends with a turtle named Filbert, and it's just kind of their misadventures. And Rocko's Modern Life fits in between, the original Nickelodeon trio of cartoons was Rugrats, which was for kids, for all kids, Doug, which was kind of for older kids, and then Ren and Stimpy, which was not at all for kids. And then, another wave of shows came along, and you had Hey Arnold, which was kind of for, young teen type kids, Angry Beavers, which was for the littler kids, and then Rocko's Modern Life, which kind of filled the same role of Ren and Stimpy and SpongeBob SquarePants, where it's a cartoon and it's on Nickelodeon, but the jokes are kind of adult. There's like Powdered Toast Man so Filbert works in a comic shop. He's the turtle. He works in a comic shop. And he has this thing about where he'll tell the people that you can look at the pages of the comic books, but you have to wash your hands after you turn the page. So he would say, you turn the page, you wash your hands. You turn the page, you wash your hands. And there was a superhero named Powdered Toast Man, and he would make you look into his nipples of the future. And so all this is very, it's like geared towards children, but it's definitely not towards children. Right. There was an episode where Heifer choked and died on like an entire rib cage from a chicken, and he went to heck. They called it heck.
Right.
And like the devil was this like demon with like a cow under it. It's just out of its mind. And it's there's so many reboots these days of different cartoons, and we're going to get into that with some of the other lists later. But it's like that show, I think the humor of it kind of would play pretty well today because it's so just out there.
Oh, sure.
So that's my number 9 is Rocko's Modern Life.
I think I watched that here and there because some of that rings a bell to me now. Yeah, that's funny. Maybe we'll get back if I can somehow watch it now. I probably would.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on anything. Hulu has no, because Nickelodeon's not on Hulu. So yeah, I don't know how you'd come across that nowadays. But yeah, Rocko's Modern Life, it's great.
Someday we'll figure out just to have everything. So my number 8, this show, for anyone that has talked to me in my first, let's say 20 years, you probably would think this show would be higher. And then the last 15 years, it's just the reason that's particularly the reason why it's lower, but I still love it. And it's the first 9 seasons of The Simpsons. The Simpsons, to me, it's the greatest animated show ever. It's the reason why other animated shows exist. For me, and this is for me. The baseball episode where just craziness ensues is Homer at the bat is just, I watched it, I literally watched it like a year ago, and I was still cracking up. You got Ken Griffey Jr. It's just, it's great. Simpsons is so funny, and it was so relevant at the time. And then it kind of, I think when South Park came along, it tried to change its ways to be more of that, and it wasn't keeping true to what it was, which, like, yeah, you can be current, but you don't have to be making fun of everything all the time. Like, that's not your job. You can still be funny, but not go that direction. And not that I dislike South Park. I think South Park is definitely important, but The Simpsons had a thing, and it kind of went away from it. And I actually watched an episode of Simpsons last year, a new episode, and that was bad.
It's on Disney Plus now.
Yeah, and you can go back and watch. You can watch everything. If you haven't seen The Simpsons, I would say season 3, 4 is probably for me where they're just in their wheelhouse, and I think that's the thing with a lot of TV shows.
If you haven't seen The Simpsons, it's probably likely that you live in Carn City.
That's true. I will say my favorite episode of The Simpsons is Marge versus the monorail, and that's actually in the I think it's the 4th season. I can double check. Yeah, it's the 12th episode in the 4th season. It's probably in my top 5 episodes of TV all time. I've watched that probably as much as I've watched a lot of Seinfeld episodes. Monorail. It has humor. It has like a little musical. It's not necessarily just Homer based or Bart based, which I like.
Right.
And I think that's what it was like. It kind of set the tone where it's like with a show like Seinfeld, where you don't have to be the main character's base and still be good. So Simpsons ranks really high. This is one of those funny things too, where I realize, like, as much as I care about music as an argumentative I get with like TV shows, I'm a little more loose, and things that I don't necessarily think are great still kind of make my list because there were moments where they were. And now that Simpsons has been on for I think 30 years, I mean, I don't think you can do anything, for 30 years and hold still. But those first 9 seasons, even 10, 11, because I watched it, I think I really watched it through the 12th season. They have their moments, but boy, if you can go back and watch the first 9 seasons of The Simpsons, which is quick, I mean, it's 22-minute episodes, you should.
Yeah.
It's great.
It'll be, next month it'll be 31 years. It debuted on December 17th, 1989.
That's crazy.
1989, yeah, that is crazy. I think everybody's, at some point or another watched some of The Simpsons. I fell off on it fairly early, but we watched it, and, we watched some of the superhero things like Radioactive Man and Bartman and all that. And I had some of those comics, too, when I was growing up, and, the old Simpsons games for the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things. The Simpsons is like, I think The Simpsons at this point, like, we said 31 years, it's a piece of Americana. It's just part of the culture. Everything's been parodied by it to a certain extent. Everything has been examined by The Simpsons. I think it's one of those, like we joked on the regular episode here the other day, that everybody's been on an episode of Law and Order. Yeah. I think everybody's done a cameo on The Simpsons, and they play themselves usually.
And it's awesome.
They just pop up. So yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent pick.
I also just want to add, I think other than when we get into my actual top show, it has my favorite not main character Sideshow Bob. I love
Anderson Varejao.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, what an incredible character! It was almost like a Seinfeld character, but because it was a cartoon, you could make it even more absurd. Right. And Sideshow Bob was.
I mean the cast of characters outside the family itself. Smithers and Moe and what's
Mr.
the boss's
Burns.
name? Mr. Burns.
Yeah.
Mr. Smithers. And like the whole Krusty the Clown, Sideshow Bob, everybody. Great cast of characters outside of the family itself, and then, like we said, tons and tons of cameos. Yeah, great pick. Number 8 for me is also going to be an animated TV show. It's going to be Archer. Archer is on FX. It's basically a cartoon of, a guy who thinks he's James Bond, but he's kind of a klutz, but somehow still gets the job done. Lots of great voice talent in this. It's Archer. Sterling Archer is voiced by H. John Benjamin, who is
also Bob.
Bob's Burger. Can of Beans in Wet Hot American Summer. He does that voice. He shows up. He might be BoJack Horseman, something like that. He's got a very distinct, like nobody knows his name unless you look him up, but his voice is very, very distinct. Lots of other great voice talent in there as well. A lot of Arrested Development vets moved over after Arrested Development and did some voice work on Archer. Probably my favorite thing about Archer is that he is obsessed with Kenny Loggins' Highway to the Danger Zone song. Like he'll be he'll be sneaking into a base and it'll become a shootout, and he will literally say, and I quote, something, 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 danger zone, and then he'll just start shooting. And in one of the seasons, like the first episode of one of the seasons, there was a plot to kidnap Kenny Loggins, and Archer had to save him. So the humor it's inappropriate, but it's funny. He's a mess. He's an alcoholic. He's a sexaholic. He's all of the things that James Bond is, right? He's like, this is a parody of James Bond, basically. Right. What was really like ironic and funny about it was the organization that he worked for was actually called ISIS, and they had to change the name whenever ISIS became a thing in the world. the Islamic States. I forget what ISIS in the show stood for. But that was a thing that they had to navigate those murky waters. But yeah, Archer, it's on FX. Most of the seasons are on Netflix, so I would highly recommend it. It's very, very, very funny.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in its entirety, but every time I put it on, I'm always like, I love that. And it's Will Arnett that's BoJack Horseman, just for correction's sake. Yeah.
Yep.
My mistake. All right. Do you want to cut into some more of our
let's do some. Why don't you do the next one? We left off on.
That's our good friend Bob Sacamano. Glad to hear from him. We've got Game of Thrones, Better Call Saul, The Wire, The Sopranos, Curb, Seinfeld, Silicon Valley, Friends, and The Office. He likes NBC. Yeah,
he likes NBC and he likes HBO.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley is great. I need to get back into that. I watch that. I binge. I'll binge a few seasons of it and then I won't watch it for years. But it's very funny. It's about a guy who makes it's basically, it takes place in. Have you watched it at all?
No, I haven't.
Silicon Valley? Okay. So it takes place in Silicon Valley, and it's the place that this kid works at is basically like Google ripoff. It's called Hooli. And he makes like a program there that they make a bunch of money off of it, and the Hooli people are trying to stop them, and it's really funny. I'm trying to think of some of the characters who play some of them. There's like the one guy is just out of his mind. I can't think of, it's been so long since I've watched it. T.J. Lawrence plays. He's like this stoner, and he runs this house for startups. Where it's like you can be like a tech startup, but you have to give me 10% of your profit, and you're allowed to live here and use this space, sort of thing. It's pretty funny, but yeah, the show in and of itself is very humorous, and I would definitely check that out, especially if you're into sort of that like tech nerdy scene and follow that at all. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say about our good friend Bob's list.
It feels like the fill list. I probably could have filled out Bob's list too, knowing him for sure. Yeah.
There's one that I'm actually really surprised didn't make it. It's on mine, so we'll kind of leave that till later.
Okay.
John K writes in. He says his list is Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Breaking Bad, MTV's The Challenge, Beavis and Butthead, Monday Night Raw, Saved by the Bell. Great pick there.
Yeah.
The Practice, Beverly Hills 90210, Nip Tuck, and Psych. Now I will say I think. In both of our cases, if game shows and reality shows would have been in bounds, The Challenge would have been on both of our lists.
Yeah, Challenge is definitely on.
100%.
Yeah, it's not even. It's honestly like the reason why I think we had to do this is my list would have been half reality shows. I'm not.
Yeah, I probably would have had like three. I think I probably would have had like three that would have made the cut.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have been hard because there's a lot out there that I really enjoy, and I'm looking forward to the new season of The Challenge.
Yep, December 9th.
Cool.
Yeah, just wait. Every Friday you're going to get Mando in review and The Challenge in review.
And we're going to be probably the only place that gives you both.
Almost for sure. Well, I shouldn't even say that because I took up our buddy, our friend Josh, who came on and he said, if you're creative, get into some groups. So I joined a few creative podcast groups on Facebook, and if you can think of a topic, there's a podcast for it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right, Melissa B. Ooh.
Yep.
All right, Melissa
Yeah,
B
go ahead.
has a very small list. I like this though. I like when you
Yeah.
just cut right to it. This Is Us, Friends, and Dawson's Creek.
She also stated that she would like to add The Office.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's her list.
thank you, Melissa.
I've watched all of Friends and all of Dawson's Creek. Melissa B is, of course, my wife. So I did watch Dawson's Creek at one point. I think there was a deal in place where if I watched Dawson's Creek, she would watch something that I wanted to watch, and I'm 95% sure that she didn't uphold her end of the bargain. Similarly, we also made a deal, and I'm sure if she really sat down and thought about it, Sex and the City would be on her list. But I've seen the entire run of Sex and the City because she said she would watch a show afterwards. I'm 100% sure she didn't follow through on that one.
Dang, well, I'm sorry to hear
Yeah.
that. Although I'm sure if I watched Sex and the City, I probably would rank it pretty high on my list just because I love Sarah Jessica Parker, as I stated before on this show.
I would hope not. Let's go. How about I'll do the next.
Okay.
I'll go first for the next set here. Number 7 is Better Call Saul for me. I think this is a testament to the character of Saul Goodman and Bob Odenkirk as an actor because I'm not a big spin-off guy. I typically don't enjoy spin-offs. I think that in a lot of cases they're cash grabs. And when I saw that there was going to be a spin-off of Saul Goodman, I was like, okay, we'll see. Because he's like a middle to small role in Breaking Bad. But when they introduced his character in this show and how they really are telling the story of him being a good man in Jimmy McGill, and basically the world just keeps kicking him while he's down over and over again until he becomes Saul Goodman. I really like the way that they approach this show and this character's story arc. I also enjoyed how they've given us a lot of Mike, who's another primary character in Breaking Bad, and kind of seeing how he becomes what he is. And then as well as giving us sort of the origin stories of Gus Fring. Those are characters that have like a bit of mystique when it comes to just the Breaking Bad run. And then some of the additional characters, Chuck McGill, Nacho, played by Michael Mando, some of the other Kim Wexford, very interesting characters that just add and kind of just help flesh out the whole world of the Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, El Camino universe. I believe, is the next season the last, or is it the next to last?
I think it's the next to last, but I think so.
Yeah. So I know they're not going to go too much longer. But yeah, I mean, Better Call Saul, great show. Bob Odenkirk is a perennial contender for Best Actor since this show began. The show itself is pretty much perennial contender for Best Drama at all the award shows. Although we've covered that some of those award shows are maybe a little bit less meaningless than others. But yeah, number 7 for me is Better Call Saul.
All right. This is where I thought maybe this is where my list gets a little bit like, okay. I had that 70s show.
Okay.
This is where I think my list kind of goes into this thing where I go about, I really like rewatching things. I like the idea of rewatchability, and that 70s show is maybe the third most rewatchable show out of my top 10. You can literally go back anytime, watch an episode anytime you want, no matter what. They're all pretty funny, except for maybe the last season has kind of some flaws. Even then, though, I mean, you still have the main. You don't have the main group of characters, but you still have a lot of the main characters, and you get Red Foreman, which I think is just a classic. Like, reminds me of my grandpa. I think a lot of people would always say, "Foot up your ass," stuff like this. It's
right.
Classic. To me, it's a classic TV show that I think was kind of underrated during its time, but you still see it rerun so much. It's rerun everywhere all the time. It's probably, if my mom did send her list over, it's probably her number 1 show. She'll tell me, I was watching that 70s show the other night. The Christmas episode where Kelso comes out with the gifts and he just starts going, Christmas, Christmas, and he runs off. Yeah. I reference this all the time. I like at the bookstore where, I think it's just a show that's really easy to watch. Like I said, there's you're not offending anyone.
Right.
There's some really good characters. I love the circle. That whole thing was just something that always just cracked me up. And really good cameos by people that were just, you're like, oh my gosh, this person's on this show. Like Luke Wilson randomly appeared on the show.
Right.
For anyone that, cares about like old school and stuff like that. And I think it's just one of those shows that was underrated at its time, maybe, feeling more properly rated as time goes along, and still holds its own because it wasn't of the time anyhow. And that's what really helped.
Yeah.
I think that really helped. The music still holds up, the cars, all that kind of stuff, and just having your tough dad who means well, and everybody always just meant well, and they did stupid stuff. And Kelso's one of the best characters to me in TV history.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and I'm not sure. It's been on a couple other lists, but, that kind of gives that show an advantage that it isn't current. It isn't trying to be, topical in the moment. Because I don't think Friends holds up at all.
No, I don't either. That's why it's not on my list.
It's not on mine either. Friends and Seinfeld are sort of considered, I think, that sort of 1-2 punch of the NBC 90s sitcoms. To me, because of the type of humor that it is, Seinfeld holds up much better than Friends does. And I think we've even referenced this before in some of the regular episodes. But I just don't think Friends holds up very well. And that is something that kind of gives... And that's going to be something that comes up with my number one show about it holding up. But we'll leave that for later. I know I said I don't like spinoffs, but I am a fan of the that 70s show spinoff, Wilder Maldorado. What the hell is his name?
Wilmer Valderrama?
Yeah, that guy. Yo Mama on MTV.
Oh, yeah. Who wasn't?
Yeah.
Wasn't a fan.
We're going to get $500 cash body. Some of those episodes were terrible. But
they did a That 80s show.
I watched that show. Yeah, I remember that.
And honestly, I actually remember it, and I was like, it's not bad. They just didn't know what they were doing. Like, it was one of those things where they tried to make it the exact same show, and if you can't do that because you already did this show set to an era. You can't. You're just going to be like that 90s. And you just can't do things like that. Once you've already set a standard.
I just don't think that the 80s are that interesting. That's the other thing.
Yeah, other than we were born in it.
That's it. That's the only good thing that happened.
Right.
That and the Lakers and Celtics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. But, yeah, that's not a bad pick. What are we on? 6?
6.
This one, I feel like this is where things are going to start maybe to get a little bit hairy for me because of the ranking of the next 3 things. Because I think a lot of people would put this towards the top. But number 6 for me is Game of Thrones. The reason it's number 6 is because the ending is awful.
Yep.
And I'll be that meme of the guy in the park with the bench and the sign that says the ending of Game of Thrones is awful. Change my mind. The first, to me, this is the thing. I know this is going to sound snobbish, and people who say this get a lot of heat and get a lot of flack. But when Game of Thrones got bad is when they left the books. I don't want to say bad. When it got not as good is when they left the books.
I'll say bad.
There were so many, and what's funny was our friend Bob, he writes in every week. He gives us a topic to talk about, and one of the topics, the one week that he gave us that we did not talk about was what should the ending of Game of Thrones be. I always feel like Game of Thrones could be its own extra episode at some point, because there's so much to unpack. You have journeys from one side of the continent to the other taking multiple seasons, and in the last season we're leaving King's Landing for the north, and then it cuts to somebody over here, and then it cuts back and they're in the north. We in the video game world we call that fast travel. You have to be a high level to do that.
Probably these eggs aren't surviving those trips.
Right. It's not. The end just got, and I remember as the end was ticking down and everybody was doing like the office pool of who's going to die, who's going to become a White Walker, who's going to end up being, the king in King's Landing. And I remember seeing Vegas put out odds who will be the king by the end of the show. And the person who had the best odds was Bran. I was like, that can't be. That doesn't make any sense. And then, sure enough, spoilers for Game of Thrones, sure enough, that's who it is. The end being what it was. But the first, 4 or 5 seasons are so good. So good. Really the first 3.
Yeah.
Things kind of get a little bit loose in 4 and 5. But through the Red Wedding, I remember Melissa hadn't seen or heard or anything about Game of Thrones. I read the first book before I watched the first season. I watched the first season. I was like, hey, you should check this out. I think you'll like it. She watches the first season. She falls in love with Ned Stark. She just loves him. He's an honorable man. Sean Bean.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then in episode 9, he gets his head cut off. And she's like, I can't watch this ever again. And then it was, for me, it was when I was reading the second book and Theon betrayed the Starks and hung the 2 burnt bodies that were supposed to be Bran and Rickon from the gates. I was like, I can't read this anymore. And then I keep reading and you realize that it's not them. There's very few shows where no character is safe.
Right.
You know, that it's, you know, I tell people when they start the show, because I've had a few people ask me, you know, in recent years, like, hey, what do you think about Game of Thrones? Do you think I should watch it? I said, don't get attached to anybody. You know, that's my number one piece of advice. But then, you know, as time wore on, we kind of got to see that really wasn't the case. That some of the characters were bulletproof. That Jon Snow wasn't going to die. That Daenerys wasn't going to die. That Arya wasn't going to die. And so I think that the longer it wore on and the farther it got away from the novels and the work of George Martin through his own fault, because it's been like 15 years between novels at this point. But that's when I think things kind of got derailed for me. But those first 3 through 5 seasons are strong enough that it puts it on my top 10. But the last several seasons are poor enough that it keeps it from being higher than number 6 for me.
That was why it didn't make my top 10. I really liked the first 3 seasons. Just the last bit of it just didn't do it for me, and I don't know. For something like that, I needed more of it to be good. But you know, the first 3 seasons are essentially perfect television. You know, I don't disagree.
Yeah, very, very good.
All right, so we're on to my number 6, and I had to go back and forth, but I decided to put this at 6 and my 5 at 5, based purely on just the emotional attachment that 5 has. So number 6 for me is Gossip Girl. XOXO. I did not watch this show in real time.
I don't know which is going to get more.
Well, I think I told you my middle.
Crap. Gossip Girl or the thing that I have at number 4. But continue.
Wait, this show was exactly what I wanted to be. I didn't watch it in real time. We watched it with Janie. We binge watched it, and it's one of my favorite binges. It might actually be my favorite binge. I had it, and it's funny because I didn't do this intentionally because I didn't know what your list was. We finished watching Gossip Girl, and I tweeted out, or I don't know, whatever. I put it out there on social media. Gossip Girl's a better show than Game of Thrones, and I just put that out there. And Brenton just got up. Brenton took off his headphones. I think we're done as a podcast group. You gotta come back. He's gone. He did a whole circle around. That was pretty funny. And whether I was whether I was being true or not, it was, it's just, I really just did it to be funny. Because I knew there were a couple people out there, like our friend EJ, that would agree, and I just needed something like that. But what I absolutely, and obviously I do think that, because I actually have it high, I have this on my list, is that there's some shows out there where you're just like, you get exactly what you expect. And this show was like, it's rich New York, it's rich kids, it's kids that aren't doing so well but somehow are still kind of rich and have their parents somehow still have a cool apartment, and you're like, this is silly and outlandish and none of this makes any sense, and how are they getting into these places? And it's just like, who cares? Just sit back, relax, and just fall to Blair Waldorf's grace. And that's what I did. I loved it. Even the final season, which is completely off the rails, is still just silly enough. And I think it honestly makes my list just because it's that perfect amount of silliness, and it wasn't taking itself seriously. Like, I think the writers were like, this is absurd. It was, to me, it's the best rendition of doing a soap opera, but somehow getting it on a network, CW, which is barely a network. It's that perfect representation of only crazy things are going to happen, and here it is. Yeah, that's why I have Gossip Girl high, and like I said, this is why it's our list and not like the comprehensive list. I love Gossip Girl. XOXO.
I feel like I need a drink.
You can.
To be continued. That was part 1 of our top 10 lists of our favorite TV shows. Like I said, when I cut in at the beginning, the next one will be Tuesday, December 1st. We'll post 5 through 10. You can follow us on Instagram at BeXtraG Podcast, at GTFills, at Y2B. Follow us on Twitter at BeXtraG Podcast, at GTFilson, at Y2B. And like our Facebook page, facebook.com/BeXtraG Podcast, youtube.com/BeXtraG Podcast. Email us at BeXtraGpodcast@gmail.com. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope we see you again for part 2. Bye, guys.